Today we're driving the most important car that BYD has launched in the UK so far, the Sealion 7. Why is it the most important? Well, for starters, it's a fully electric family SUV, so it's a Tesla Model Y rival, which last year was the best-selling car in the entire world. It can also charge faster than other BYD models, and is more practical. But while this might be a big step forwards for BYD, how does it compare against rival SUVs from other brands? Stay watching and I'll tell you everything you need to know. And don't forget to subscribe for lots more new car reviews, reveals and road trips. Now let's start by unpicking BYD's slightly confusing model lineup and explaining exactly where the Sealion 7 fits into that. So on one hand, there appears to be some consistency to BYD's naming strategy because several of its models are named after marine mammals. We've got the Dolphin, an MG4 sized hatchback, the Seal, which is a Tesla Model 3 rival, and then the Seal U, which, given its name and how it looks, you might assume is some sort of SUV version of the Seal. It is, though, entirely unrelated. In fact, it's not even an electric car at all. It is a plug-in hybrid. In fact, it's this new Sealion 7 that is essentially the SUV version of the Seal. So it sits above the Atto 3, BYD's other fully electric SUV, which isn't named after an animal at all. Apparently, it's named after a unit of time. Anyway, why is this called the Sealion 7? Is it the 7th generation of the Sealion, or are there 6 smaller Sealions floating around? Well, in some other markets, the Seal U, or UDMI to give it its full name, is called the Sealion 6, and the Sealion 5 was recently launched in China. But the 7 is the first and at the moment only Sealion that's available in the UK. But while BYD's overall model lineup might be a bit confusing, the Sealion 7 range is actually very straightforward because there are just 3 different versions to choose from. The comfort and the design have the same 82.5 kilowatt hour usable capacity battery. The big difference is that the comfort has a single electric motor driving its rear wheels, whereas the design has a second electric motor on the front axle, giving it more power and also four-wheel drive. And then at the top of the range, there's this excellence. It has the same twin motor setup as the design, but it has an even bigger 91.3 kilowatt hour battery. Now, if you've read any of the tabloids recently, you might be worried that electric cars are a massive fire hazard, and if you buy one, you'll be lucky to get to work in the morning without being incinerated. The truth is very different. In fact, recent studies in the US and Sweden have shown that electric cars are around 20 times less likely than petrols or diesels to catch fire. But on the rare occasions they do, that fire can be quite difficult to put out. So it's a good thing that the Sealion 7 has a more thermally stable type of battery called lithium iron phosphate, or LFP. BYD makes these batteries itself. They are said to last longer than other types of lithium-ion battery, and they don't have any cobalt in them, which means in some respects they're more environmentally friendly. The downside of LFP batteries is that they aren't as energy dense as other types of lithium-ion battery. In simple terms, that means you often need a physically bigger battery or more cells to achieve the same capacity, and that is probably why the Sealion 7 is quite heavy, and also the range between charges isn't as amazing as you might expect. So this range-topping excellence weighs just under 2.5 tons and has an official range of 311 miles. If you go for the design, that weighs around 100 kilos less and has a range of 283 miles. And the entry-level comfort, that weighs about 2.2 tons and has a range of 300 miles. Not bad, but an entry-level Tesla Model Y weighs less than 2 tons and has an official range of 373 miles. And plenty of other electric SUVs can travel further than this too. On the other hand, the Sealion 7 can charge slightly faster than the Model Y. In ideal conditions, you'll be waiting just 24 minutes for a 10 to 80% top-up. Now, Tesla doesn't officially talk about charging times, but independent tests have shown that a 10 to 80% top-up, again in ideal conditions, takes around 27 minutes in the Model Y, because while this car can't accept quite the same peak charging rate, it can sustain it for a longer period. If you go for a comfort or design version of the Sealion, then that won't be able to charge quite as quickly. You'll be waiting at least 32 minutes for a 10 to 80% top up. And remember, that is to charge a smaller battery. Anyway, enough about the electrical stuff. What's the Sealion 7 actually like as a car? Well, it's pretty big. It's slightly longer than a Model Y or an Audi Q6 e-tron actually, which is obviously a much more expensive car. We'll talk more about prices for the Sealion 7 a little bit later on. And that means that you get a nice big boot. All versions have a powered tailgate as standard, and inside here, officially, there is 520 litres of storage below this partial shelf. You also get a height adjustable boot floor as standard on all versions, although the difference between the highest setting and the lowest is about that much, so I'm not entirely sure of the point of that, but it is useful that you get a huge well under this floor, which is useful for stowing the charging cables or anything else you want to keep out of sight. The boot isn't perhaps the widest, but it is a nice square shape. The only thing is that because of this coupe-esque rear end, it means that carrying taller items right at the back of the boot here is a bit more of a challenge. You can, of course, though, fold down the rear seats if you need to carry bigger things. There are no handles on the walls of the boot to make that easier. You have to reach forward and flick these levers on the tops of the seat backs here. And if you join me at the front of the car, under the bonnet, you will find an extra 58 litres of storage, which is quite a lot. In fact, it's enough for a carry-on suitcase. And if you thought the boot was good, look at this rear seat area. There is absolutely loads of space. I'm just over 6 feet tall. This seat in front is set up for my driving position. And look at all that knee room. Plenty of foot space as well under the front seat back, and of course you get a completely flat floor. So although whoever's sitting in the middle here has a slightly uncomfortable humped seat back, they don't have to straddle a transmission tunnel there. The seating position itself is also fairly comfortable. The seats are certainly much more supportive than they are in a Model Y, and you can adjust the angle of the backrest. They are in their most reclined position at the moment, but you can make them more upright. The only reason you'd really do that is if you needed to carry more stuff in the boot and you still needed rear passengers, because if you make them more upright, then it's not very comfortable. The only thing that isn't perhaps quite so great is headroom, because if I do sit right back in my seat and use this head restraint, then my head is just brushing the ceiling there. But still, someone of my height is absolutely fine back here, and as I say, loads of knee room. You've also got some good sized door bins. There's another cubby just above that by the door pull, and these pouches on the backs of the front seats. You've got two smaller ones here for phones or books, and then a larger one just below it. On top of that, all versions come with heated seats as standard. So all things considered, the Sealion 7 is very impressive in the back. In the front, you don't just get heated seats, you get ventilated seats as well. So this car can keep you ideally acclimatized in both hot and cold weather. So that's very nice. And also the seats themselves, they are comfortable. Not a huge amount of side support, but more than there is in a Model Y. And you get electric adjustment for the driver's seat on all trim levels. You also feel quite high up, quite far from the road. You do in a Model Y as well, but in that car you feel like you're on a tall seat in what's quite a low car, whereas here the whole car feels quite far from the road, so it's a proper SUV experience. And visibility isn't too bad, even though these windscreen pillars here, they are fairly chunky and they come back quite a long way towards your head. They don't get in the way too much at junctions or roundabouts, certainly not for my driving position at least. Although the view out the back is pretty terrible, so it's a good thing that you get a 360-degree parking camera as standard. The only thing that's a little bit weird about the driving position is that the steering wheel sprouts out of the dashboard fairly low down, so it's almost angled up towards my face slightly. I would prefer it to be a little bit higher up and angled towards my chest. But on the plus side, it does mean that I get a clear, unobstructed view of this digital display behind the steering wheel. Perhaps the most impressive thing about the Sealion 7 though is the quality of the interior. All of the surfaces are trimmed in leather or leatherette, and there are lots of other nice materials as well. There's this suede effect down here. You've also got this crystal gear lever like you get in a high-end BMW or a high-end Volvo, and everything feels really solid. In fact, there are only a couple of things like this plastic here behind the steering wheel that let the side down slightly. But overall, as I say, interior quality is really, really impressive here, and certainly a notch above the Tesla Model Y. All versions get this 15.6-inch touchscreen infotainment system as standard, and is quite high up on the dashboard, so it's easy to see. It's nice and bright. It responds quickly when you press the icons, and as you can with other BYD models, you can change the layout from landscape to portrait by pressing an icon in the bottom right-hand corner. The only thing is that you can't do that if you're running smartphone mirroring. So if you want to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, then you have to revert back to landscape. Another slightly annoying thing is that there are no physical controls for the air conditioning. So if you want to adjust the interior temperature on the move, you either have to use the voice control system or the touchscreen itself, which is a little bit fiddly. In terms of storage, you are very well catered for. You have an enormous cubby under this central armrest here. There are 2 cup holders that are actually height adjustable. Look, I can raise that bottle up by pressing a little button there. In front of that, there is this tray that has a wireless charging pad on it and a little vent down here that blows cold air onto your phone to stop it overheating when it's charging. Underneath this floating center console, you'll find a big tray down here that's useful for stowing your wallet or some snacks. And just as was the case in the back, the door bins are a decent size, and you've also got some other cubbies up here just by the door handles. Overall, the front of the Sealion 7 is a really nice place to be. Now, 4-wheel drive versions of the Sealion 7, including this Excellence model, are pretty quick. They can do 0 to 62 in just 4.5 seconds. In fact, BYD is so proud of that it has written it on the back of the car. But while BYD describes this as a performance SUV, it doesn't really feel like one, to be honest, because although it's very fast in a straight line, it isn't particularly agile. There's a reasonable amount of body lean when you're going around corners. And the steering, even if you choose sport mode, is quite light, and it doesn't really give you a great sense of connection with the front wheels. But most family SUV buyers aren't really that bothered about sporty handling. They're far more concerned with things like ride comfort and refinement. And those are 2 things that the Sealion 7 does very well indeed. There is very little road noise in this car. This particular one does have winter tyres on. They can sometimes reduce the amount of road noise. We'll have to drive the car in the UK to find out how it translates over there. But certainly wind noise is very well contained. Even at motorway speeds, we were driving on the Autobahn earlier on, there is very little wind flutter here. And that's helped in part, no doubt, by the fact that you get laminated side windows as standard on all versions of the Sealion. On the whole, ride comfort is also very good. This is certainly a more comfortable car than a Tesla Model Y, if not quite as smooth as an Audi Q6 e-tron, because although it deals with bigger imperfections very well, like speed bumps and even potholes, on rippled sections of road it does get into a bit of a rhythm where you find your head banging repeatedly against the head restraint there. So not perfect, but more comfortable than a lot of its similarly priced rivals. As with most EVs, you can adjust the level of regenerative braking, so that's how quickly you slow down when you just lift off the accelerator pedal, but there is no proper one pedal mode. So if you want to slow down quickly, you will need to use the brake pedal itself. But fortunately, it's pretty easy to judge how much pressure you need to apply on that to bring yourself to a smooth stop. It's not grabby like it can be on some electric cars. So the Sealion 7 might not be especially sporty, but it's comfortable, it's quiet, and overall, it's very pleasant to drive. So let's talk about prices, because although they haven't been officially announced yet, we have it on good authority that the entry-level comfort version of the Sealion 7 will start at just over £45,000. So it'll be cheaper than a Tesla Model Y. If you want the mid-spec design version, that'll cost you around £50,000. And although indicated prices aren't available for this range-topping excellence, obviously that's going to be a bit more expensive again. So although this might not have the most amazing range, it's good to drive, it has a practical, well-finished interior, and it's very competitively priced. Overall, it's BYD's best effort yet, and a very fine electric SUV. Thanks for watching this video. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give it a like and hit subscribe. If you want to watch another one, click up there. And for our full detailed written review of the Sealion 7, click there.